It's a blistering hot summer day, the kind where every drop of water feels like a treasure, and you're doing everything you can to conserve it. But imagine this, your HOA, the very people who are supposed to maintain harmony, decide to cut your water line during a drought. That's exactly what happened to me. At first, it seemed like a mistake, a misunderstanding. But as the days passed, it became clear that this was no accident. I'm talking about a fight that quickly went from frustrating to downright bizarre. My water line was cut, and no one was offering any help, no apology, no explanation. In a community where everyone relies on lush lawns and constant irrigation, this felt personal. And when the drought hit, it wasn't just my water that was drying up. The HOA's pristine lawns were thirsty too. That's when I had an idea. Maybe it wasn't just my water they should worry about. I decided to get creative. Using the natural creek that ran near my property, I took matters into my own hands. I didn't just sit back and accept their decision. I found a way to divert that creek straight into their lawns. But things didn't go as planned. Stay tuned to find out how they reacted and what happened next. To understand why the HOA's decision hit so hard, you need to know a bit about our community. It's the type of place where everyone has their picture-perfect front yard. You know the kind, manicured lawns, bushes trimmed like sculptures, flowers that always seem to bloom at the right time. And all that lush greenery relies on water. A lot of water. So when the drought hit, things started to get tense. The grass started to turn brown, and the flowers began to wilt. But the HOA, they were determined to keep the lawns green, no matter the cost. That meant cutting off my water without even a heads up. I wasn't the only one struggling with water shortages, though. People were dealing with the same issues, using sprinklers on a timer, and still watching the land dry up around them. It felt like the HOA had no understanding of how bad the drought actually was. They were more concerned with appearances, with keeping up a facade of perfection. And when my water line got cut, it felt like a final insult. I knew I had to do something. I wasn't about to just sit by while they kept wasting water on lawns that didn't need it, especially when mine was taken away. So, with no one watching, I started looking at the creek. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to make a statement, and maybe, just maybe, enough to change things. The creek, though small, had always been a quiet presence. It ran along the edge of the property line, a natural stream that had been there long before the HOA's perfect lawns. Most people never gave it much thought, but to me it was an opportunity. I knew if I could redirect its flow just enough, it would spill onto their precious turf. It wasn't going to be a permanent solution, just a temporary payback, a way to make them feel the consequences of their actions. But the moment I set foot near that creek, something hit me. The community was already divided over the drought. Some were angry, others were resigned, but there was no clear leader, no one to voice the frustration we all felt. The HOA, with their neatly pressed suits and endless meetings, didn't seem to care about the real struggles we were facing. People were starting to notice. My neighbors, those who knew what had happened, were giving me curious looks. They'd heard the rumors about the water line, but no one dared to speak out. A few even whispered their support, but none were brave enough to join me in defying the HOA. I began sneaking out at night, working under the cover of darkness. The creek was my secret weapon, but it felt like something more. With every stone I moved, with every inch of water I diverted, I was fighting for more than just my own property. I was standing up to a system that didn't care about the struggle of its residents, but I had to wonder, what would happen if they found out? Would the HOA come after me? Would they escalate things even further? I could feel the tension rising, and I hadn't even seen the first real consequence yet. The nights were becoming more intense. I was working faster, more carefully, and with an unsettling sense of urgency. Each time I diverted just a little more water from the creek, I felt the pressure building. The HOA wasn't stupid. They have to notice the strange water patterns eventually. The grass on their precious lawns was starting to get too lush, while the earth beneath my feet was growing dry, cracked, and desperate for water. But I couldn't stop now. I had to see this through. Then one morning, just a few days into my project, I saw something that froze me in my tracks. The HOA had sent a crew to check the irrigation system, and they were standing by the creek, talking in low voices. They were looking at the water, following its path, and one of them pointed directly in my direction. It was too close, too obvious. I quickly ducked out of sight, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to move fast. The next night, I was back at the creek, trying to reinforce my makeshift diversion. But as I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't just paranoia, it was real. The shadows seemed to shift, and every noise felt amplified in the quiet night air. I couldn't risk getting caught. If they figured out what I was doing, I knew the HOA would come down hard on me. But I also knew I couldn't let them keep draining the creek while their lawns thrived on stolen water. The stakes were higher now. I wasn't just fighting for water. I was fighting for control, for justice, for a chance to stand up to a system that had ignored the very real struggles of its people. And just as I thought I was finally getting ahead, I heard it. A truck pulling up, headlights cutting through the darkness. Someone was here. And this time, it wasn't just the HOA. The headlights grew brighter, and my pulse quickened. I crouched lower, hidden behind a thicket of bushes, trying to control my breathing. Who was out there? The truck stopped near the creek, and I heard voices, low at first, but then one of them became clearer. It wasn't just the HOA crew. It was Mark, one of the board members. But that wasn't the twist. What really made my blood run cold was the voice that answered him. It was my neighbor, Dave. Dave had always been the quiet type, kept to himself, never really involved in the HOA drama. But there he was, standing beside Mark, talking like they were old friends. I couldn't believe it. My mind raced. Why was Dave out here in the middle of the night with the HOA? And why was he helping them? My gut twisted with suspicion. Had he betrayed me? Had he sold me out to save his own lawn? I stayed as still as I could, listening to their conversation. Mark was talking about the creek and the water diversion, but it didn't sound like they were just planning to fix the issue. They were talking about something more drastic. My heart dropped when I overheard them mention installing a new water line, one that would cut off the creek entirely and redirect it somewhere else permanently. They were going to cut off my access to the water once and for all, and they weren't stopping there. They planned to turn the whole situation into a bigger problem, one that could affect everyone in the neighborhood. I had to act fast, but the more I heard, the more I realized just how deep the web of manipulation and secrecy went. This wasn't just about a water line anymore. It was about control over the entire community, over everything we were trying to protect. And now it wasn't just me against the HOA. There were new players in this game. The question was, what were they planning to do next? I couldn't wait any longer. The plan was clear now. If they followed through with cutting off the creek and installing their new water line, it would be game over for all of us. I had to stop them before they had the chance to execute whatever scheme they cooked up. As quietly as possible, I slipped away from the bushes and began sprinting back to my property, heart pounding in my ears. Every step felt heavier, like I was racing against a clock that was ticking faster with each passing second. I grabbed my phone, quickly dialing a few neighbors I trusted, folks who were fed up with the HOA's control but too scared to speak out. I didn't have much time, but I needed reinforcements. Within minutes, I was back at the creek, ready to confront Mark and Dave before they could finish their plans. My mind was a blur, thinking of ways to sabotage their work without getting caught. I was prepared for anything at that point, but as I rounded the corner, I froze. The truck was gone, the headlights no longer cutting through the darkness, and standing by the creek, calmly watching me, was Dave. Only it wasn't just him. There were others, more neighbors than I'd ever expected, and they weren't with the HOA. They were standing with me. The twist? Dave wasn't a traitor. He had been working behind the scenes, gathering people who shared the same frustration, the same anger about the HOA's manipulation.